Thank you. Thank you very much for that very clear presentation. Workshop 7 was on governance challenges in crisis and post-conflict countries. This workshop examined the unique variables or aspects of divided societies and governments facing or having recently faced crises of political, economic, social, or environmental nature. I am pleased to invite Excellency Mrs. Dr. Ponso Sikatle, to Minister of Local Government and Chieftainship of the Kingdom of Lesotho. Please.
Thank you, Chairperson. I hope you are going to allocate her 5 minutes to me because she was precise. Dear colleagues, Workshop 7's theme was governance challenges in crisis and post-conflict countries. We had 5 sessions. Session 1 covering the sub-theme of post-conflict recovery of governance and public administration and the delivery of services. Session 2 covering security as a critical public service and a prerequisite for recovery and development, looking at security sector reforms in post-colonial, post-conflict situations. Session 3 covered the sub-theme of recovery in the provision of judicial services and reconstructing reconciliation mechanisms and processes. Session 4 discussed constructing conflict-sensitive constitutions, processes and content of post-conflict constitutions. And the last session, which was the 5th session, discussed conflict prevention through redistributive justice. The participants acknowledged from the onset that post-conflict recovery and development is a complex process, balancing all of the substantive processes, technical and political imperatives, in appropriate, sequenced, and conflict-sensitive ways is a feat that has only been at best partially accomplished. And we looked at and we explored all these different ways. And participants underscored issues that are essential principles of policy and practice in post-conflict engagements. Most fundamentally, we acknowledge that sustained peace requires a visionary leadership, a cohesive society, and a partnership between the two that is based on transparency, trust, and participation. And we came up with 13 recommendations. A very good, a like number to some and not so lucky to others. The first recommendation is that leaders need to be strongly committed to the interests of their country in order to develop a shared national vision and be responsible to manage people's expectations. And that governments should convey to the citizenry that vision cannot be delivered immediately, but that is a path along which the country will develop. The second recommendation is that the vision and mission of post-conflict government should be based on national dialogue and a delineation of short-term and long-term priorities, and should be accompanied by the establishment of a public service that is viewed by the public as united and technically competent and distinct from the pre-conflict system. Such a service is key to delivering on the commonly established priorities. 3, that post-conflict governance should be inclusive and reflect a people's diversity. Participants noted that several post-conflict transitional governments have sought to achieve this goal by sharing power among groups with different ethnic or religious identities. However, constituting a government along these lines, especially in societies where such identities have previously not been sharply drawn, or where different groups have suffered from a relatively unequal access to opportunity, may heighten division among groups and lay the basis for future conflict. Fourthly, it is not possible to transform government institutions without a transformation of mindsets. That there is need for a transformation generally, but that such a transformation should be a two-pronged transformation. Transformation of government institutions on the one hand, and transformation of people's mindsets on the other, such that people may relate better and positively and be in a position to engage each other and engage one another positively to resolve conflict and in future to prevent conflict. The fifth point is that post-conflict revival of governance structures needs to be sensitive to the specific country context. Aid policies must be driven by needs that are assessed in an inclusive and participatory manner. Sixth, external funding and technical assistance must be sequenced and long-term, and must focus on developing the capacity of governments to mobilize domestic resources. The paradox of this is that in most cases, development aid is available early on when crisis or post-conflict government absorptive capacity is at its weakest. When governments develop the capacity, aid often dries up. External donors need also to strike a balance between the need for ensuring accountability and the necessity of collaborating effectively with other assistance groups. Seventh, there needs to be a careful balance between short-term and long-term initiatives. That capacity building of institutions must begin immediately, but must be sequenced realistically, acknowledging that such programs of reform must be incremental, ongoing, and long-term. 8, a well-governed security sector is a key public service and a prerequisite for stability, recovery, and development. Thus, security sector reforms need to be initiated and implemented within a wider and long-term peace-building perspective. Downsizing or reforming the security sector on the basis of international standards is not a sufficient starting point. The primary emphasis should be on determining, on the basis of dialogue among relevant stakeholders, the genuine internal and external security needs of a post-conflict society. 9, the establishment of truth and equitable access to justice, often absent in many pre-conflict and in conflict situations, is key to lasting reconciliation and hence sustainable peace. However, the imperatives of justice can often clash with those of reconciliation. Fragile post-conflict situations may not be able to stand the stress of putting leaders on trial. The balance may lie in ensuring that justice and human rights protection is equitably and fairly available to communities and individuals in the short term through an interim system of rule of law, while wider justice is achieved at the national level through mechanisms ranging from truth commissions to special courts once the process of recovery is stabilized. 10, sustainable peace requires legal and constitutional frameworks for governance that must be constructed through a process of inclusive participation, especially if they are expected to be visionary and accomplish more than an end.